What's going on YouTube? It's Mid-40s Gamer here, coming at you with some more Elden Ring content. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to complete Yura's questline so that you can get your hands on Eleonora's pole blade, which is arguably one of the best pole blades in the game, especially if you're partial to bleed builds. This Rivers of Blood-like weapon comes straight from the land of reeds, complete with a vicious blood blade dance that'll make you more dangerous than John Wick. So let's get ready to make a fire, have tea and listen for invaders, tell Melina boards don't hit back, and get after it. Our story begins early on in Limgrave at the Seaside Ruins site of Grace, and as you can see from the map footage, it's not all too far away from your initial starting point at the first step, especially if you've already unlocked the Spirit Steed Torrent. From this location, we'll get our bearings for just a second, and then take a quick 50-meter jog due east to scope out an ancient ruined structure off to the left. Within the shade of this broken down ruin, you'll meet Yura for the first time at his makeshift camp. During your brief conversation with Yura, he'll welcome you as a new Tarnished and give you a rather stern warning about a dragon that patrols the nearby lake. But whoever takes warning seriously, and really we'd rather be fighting dragons than getting waffle stomped by a handful of rats in some creepy dungeon. That being said, once Yura's done imparting all of his wisdom that we're meant to ignore anyway, we'll head off into the lake in search of this mighty beast. You can find Dragon Agheel by traveling directly north from Yura's location and through the outer edge of the dragon-burnt ruins into Agheel Lake. This colossal dragon may be the size of an 18-wheeler with wings, but it's actually possible to miss him if you don't roll up on the host of minor enemies that are huddled in worship around a bonfire. The bonfire can be found in the shallow waters to the northwest of the largest structure in the dragon-burnt ruins. Once Agheel touches down, all bets are off, and it's time for you to pull out all the stops to make Yura feel stupid when you roll back into camp with a still-beating dragon heart. As dragon fights go, this one shouldn't be overly tough, since while on the ground, Agheel's foot stomps and tail swipes are super telegraphed, and when he takes off into the air, you can just use Torrent's maneuverability to steer clear of his more dangerous attacks. When fighting this mini-boss early on, we recommend a bleed weapon that'll take large chunks out of his health bar once you've finally built up enough hemorrhage. It's also important to note you can also summon Yura to help you with the Agheel fight if you're having trouble. Summoning him for this fight is optional and doesn't bar you from continuing the quest. Once Agheel is no more, you can return to Yura for additional dialogue that revolves around the ancient arts of Dragon Communion. The bulk of Yura's dialogue at this point will steer you in the direction of the Church of the Dragon Communion, with some additional dialogue if you've summoned him for the fight. And while we could include all of Yura's dialogue, we'll let you experience the story for yourself and move on to his next location, which will require us to travel across Agheel Lake to the northwest towards the underpass in the distance. After steering back through the edge of the dragon-burnt ruins and continuing to the northwest, we'll continue on by heading beneath the underpass and driving Torrent on a bit further for about 100 meters until Torrent vanishes beneath us, signaling an upcoming invasion. At this point, you'll be invaded by Nerijus, who's one of the notorious Bloody Fingers that hunts their fellow Tarnished to appease the Lord of Blood. Nerijus wields two daggers that quickly build up bleed and will use his speed to be all over you like white on rice, a glass of milk, and a paper plate in a snowstorm. He also has a special skill that can build up bleed at range. The good news is that if you land a few hits and survive initial contact, you'll hear Yura's dialogue commence and he'll be automatically summoned to your aid. With Yura's giant katana entering into the fray, this fight should become significantly easier. It is fairly interesting to note that the dialogue up until this point in the quest underpins the fact that Yura has hunted dragons in the past and is extremely knowledgeable about the origins and use of Dragon Communion, but never uses any dragon powers in combat because he believes them to be ruinous. Some may argue that it's likely due to the fact that whoever he hunted dragons with in the past was corrupted by the power of that special communion. Once the final blow is struck and Nerijus is no more, you'll be awarded with his dagger Reduvia, which, like many bleed weapons, scales with strength, dexterity, and arcane. We can find Yura waiting close by to the north, where he'll not only be surprised that we fought Nerijus and lived, but he'll provide a bit more dialogue to fill in this intriguing character's background. Once we've exhausted all of Yura's dialogue at this location, which explains that he's a hunter of bloody fingers, we'll need to do a bit more running around to meet him at his next location, which, as you can see from the map footage, will be within the confines of Lairn of the Lakes. For our first and only subtask for this area, we'll be starting out at the Temple Quarter site of Grace, which isn't a heavy lift to get to. Yura's next location is unfortunately locked behind the magical gates within the Academy of Raya Lucaria, and the key to those gates just happens to be underneath a giant sleeping dragon. There are two courses of action here, and the most dangerous one is to try and fight this dragon straight up, which at this point would likely end with you feeling cheated and ending up like a brown stain on a mattress. The path of least resistance in this case, and the most probable course of action for the quickest quest completion, is to ride into the small alcove behind the dragon, loot the key off the dead body, and skate out as fast as possible, avoiding engagement. After escaping with the magical key, we'll have everything that we need at this point to enter the confines of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. As you can see from the map footage, our next stop will be the South Raya Lucaria Gate, which can be reached by making your way up a set of stairs at the northwestern edge of the Academy Gate town. You will meet some resistance since the staircase is fortified with blockades and soldiers, and you can fight them if you like, but it's no trouble just to run past them on torrent and head to the site of Grace near the southern gate. From this side of Grace, you can head towards the giant gate protected by a blue magical ward and phase through it into the Raya Lucaria entry courtyard. This area may be a bit confusing to some since there are a few paths that branch out from here, which at first glance look like they're warded. Not to worry though, with the key in hand, the magical wards can be walked right through. From this point, we'll take a leisurely jog to the north and continue on for about 100 meters until we reach the first break in the path. Here on the ground of this ancient pathway, you'll notice a red summoning sign on the ground, which will allow you to assist Yura once again in his quest to bring an end to the Bloody Fingers. Once you finally zone in the invasion area, the fight will already be on in full. You'll need to assist Yura in defeating the Bloody Finger Raven Mount assassin, who is one of the loyal servants of the Lord of Blood. This particular assassin wields dual raptor talons that deal blood loss buildup, and he often uses their Raptor of the Mist skill. If he utilizes that attack, he'll jump up into the air, slashing down with the claws, which deals some pretty massive damage. After wiping the assassin off the map, you'll be returned to your own world, and when you arrive, Yura will be located next to the moss-covered stone railing nearby. After speaking with him, he'll award you with some smithing stones and explain to you that he's been tracking the deadliest member of the Bloody Fingers, who goes by the name of Eleonora. In order to reach Eleonora's last known location, we'll need to head out on a side task once again, and as you can see from the map footage, our first stop will be Fort Faroth in the lands of Caelid. The reason for these subtasks is because in order to reach Altus Plateau, we'll need to collect 2 halves of an ancient medallion that serve as a key to operate the Lift of Dectus, which is basically just a stone elevator. The first half of this key can be located within the walls of Fort Faroth, and while you may be thinking you have to clear a fort of enemies for this special key, that's not exactly the case. You can just make a quick dash through the front entrance and head through a few enemies to a ladder that leads to the upper battlements of the fort. Once you reach the top of the ladder, just a few feet away is a chest that houses the right half of the Dectus medallion. After the right half is secure, we'll head out and search for the left, and as you can see from the map footage, that search will bring us to the south of the Mistwood in Limgrave, where we'll be starting out at the Fort Height west side of Grace. You don't have to secure these medallions in any particular order, so if you want to head to Fort Height before you head to Fort Faroth, you can do that as well. From the site of Grace, we can hop on Torrent and kick him into high gear in preparation to weave through some of the fort's rudimentary external defenses. The overrun fort of Kenneth Height, who claims to be the next ruler of Limgrave if you're familiar with his questline, is a very small area, and like Fort Faroth, it's really not too difficult to navigate to the next medallion half. You can expect plenty of enemies in this mini dungeon area, but aside from a heavy-hitting knight on the second level, you won't find any large bosses here. You will, however, need to be prepared for enemy firebombs that occasionally make contact with some pre-staged red oil barrels along your path. Once you're safely up the stairs and past the bulk of the enemies, you can make your way up the tower ladder, which ends on a small landing with a chest that contains the other half of the medallion. Once we pop the top on this loot bucket and secure the left half of the Dectus medallion, we'll be ready to head over to the Lift of Dectus, which as you can see from the map footage is quite a ways to the north. You can reach this area by heading east from the Caria Manor, jumping over the ravine and following the path up to the Bellum Church. From the church, you can head north to the lift, but if you take a direct approach, you'll be subjected to a ridiculously accurate catapult that's far more annoying than those people that park too close to the line in a parking lot. Once you activate the lift, you'll be treated to a small cutscene of its dramatic activation sequence, and when it's all said and done, you'll be on top of the Altus Plateau. As you can see from the map footage, once you reach the top of the lift, you can follow the road that's right in front of you to the Altus Highway Junction side of Grace. And from there, you can move to the northeast where you'll discover the Second Church of Marika. There's a great spot to get down near the church, and we've marked that spot with a green icon so you can easily visualize where your infill route will be. The reason for guiding you in on the map is really just to spare you since it's a really long ride. Once you dismount Torrent and enter the church, you'll come upon Yura laying in the prone, bleeding out and barely alive. Although Yura is in the last moments of his life, he's managed to save his final few breaths to impart some final words. He'll explain to you that he was no match for Eleonora and leaves you with his famous katana that scales primarily with dexterity. After you've witnessed Yura's grim conclusion, you won't have a whole lot of time to mourn the loss of your new friend because Eleonora will invade shortly after. Eleonora is no pushover, and aside from the devastating pole blade she wields, you can also expect her to use Dragon Communion incantations such as Agheel's Flame and Grael's Roar. Some would say that Eleonora and Yura were once dragon hunters together, but Eleonora's hunger for power through the use of dragon incantations corrupted her, and now her legacy is stained with cursed blood. While this may be the end of Yura's story, you'll run into an entity named Shibari wearing Yura's meat suit at the Seaside Ruins site of Grace, who will convince you to join the Frenzied Flame, but that's a story for another day. Once Eleonora is defeated, you'll receive Eleonora's pole blade and the Purifying Crystal Tear, bringing this whole story to a close. Well folks, it looks like we're coming to the end of another Elden Ring video as we revisit long-forgotten middle school traumas and try to figure out what the hell Common Core math actually is. All of us here at Mid-40s Gamer would like to take this time to personally thank you for watching, and if you haven't done so already, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on any new Mid-40s Gamer content. And if you aren't too busy wondering how a seed can blow across the ocean and sprout on another continent, leave us a comment in the comment section and let us know how we're doing. So until next time, just remember, if you tried a new variety of apple every day, it would take you more than 20 years to try them all. Girls have more taste buds than boys, and as always, good hunting.